Yeah, okay, so recording started. I think Dan's audio is off, so maybe I'll run here, if that's all right. Welcome, everybody. July 6th, Tinkerbell community meeting, contributors meeting. Any new faces that are interested in saying hello, please feel free to. All right. Show and tell. This is a new one for newer people, I guess. We added an agenda item. If you're doing anything cool with Kubernetes or with Tinkerbell, or you have a setup that you're interested in showing, I think home labs, etc., would be awesome. I don't have anything to share today, but if you do, please feel free to chime in and share.
At the moment, no. On Friday, yes. Marky will be walking us through his home lab as a special event.
Oh,
and that'll
cool.
be up as a listed event on the Tinkerbell YouTube at the later on today.
Very nice. Is that something, if other people were interested in, they could reach out to you, Jeremy? And okay, cool. So if you're watching this,
absolutely, please do.
Right on. If you see this in the future, Jeremy's your guy. I can help you on there.
Maybe drop the link in the show and tell section for this week as a link to the future. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Anybody else?
Yes. Sorry. I'll add it quickly into the thing. Oh, I'll put it here for now. I'll just quickly share my screen. I don't know if people have seen this before. Can I share my screen? Can I share what I want to share? 1 second. Here we go. So I don't know if you can see this or not. It should say UEFI payload package.
Yep, got it.
Okay, cool. So this has been some work that's been going on with some Google engineers and a few others. It was kind of touched on a couple of years ago as part of like Google Summer of Code, and then not really touched for a while after that. And then somehow it's suddenly become kind of a little bit popular again. Effectively, what this is this is work for extending kexec. Normally, when we kexec into a different Linux kernel. So we already have a Linux kernel running. We tell kexec to load a new kernel, and then we do a kexec run. And what that typically does is it dumps most of the kernel structures of memory out and basically starts executing that brand new kernel and basically boots from that brand new kernel. What this work does is this is effectively built a UEFI loader, which looks enough like a kernel. So effectively, we can kexec into a UEFI bootloader, which will immediately basically start booting a different operating system. So instead of us pivoting into a new kernel of a new Linux distro, we can pivot into a bootloader, which will start ESXi or Windows 2019 and things like that. So we get basically that sort of instant reboot directly into a new operating system. As you can see, there's lots of TBDs in here. It's still all very rough and ready, but I'm kind of been wanting to play with it for the last 2 weeks whilst I've been on holiday. And I've been sat on the beach dreaming about playing with bootloaders, but it's something that if it kind of gets to a good level of maturity, should allow people to pivot into new operating systems that previously we couldn't without having to do any reboots. So I'll add that into the doc for people to find later on.
That's awesome. That would be really cool. Nice find. Thanks, Dan.
So yeah, other than that, there's some additional work going on with there will be with Crocodile to build ESXi operating systems even faster. And I sent Dan Lance another message about using Sigstore to do image signing. So I'll be looking into that as well over the next couple of weeks as and when I have the opportunity to do so.
Right on. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. Looks like we're kind of in the mix of show and tell topics at the same token here. I guess just for a recap, before we started the recording, Nicholas asked about official Helm charts, and Nahum pointed us to something that Marky's been working on. I could throw it out there, I guess, one more time. Does anybody else know of any Helm charts in the making at the moment, or any other official ones that are up and coming?
I have some year-old charts I was working on when I was trying to get, I was trying too many things at once. I was trying to get it deployed on Kubernetes on Pies, and we didn't even have like ARM images ready. But anyway, it might act as a starting point, the charts that I linked.
Is that true, Dan? You've never written a Helm chart? I find that impossible.
Oh, I've no idea how you put them together. So people have been asking them for KubeVip, and I kind of started looking at the documentation. I was like, what on earth is this lunacy?
In this case, these aren't actual real Helm charts. I think these are just a bunch of Kubernetes YAML files.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right on.
Was a very good starting point if you want to set up a Helm chart. So it's definitely nice.
If I just nominate myself. Cool.
All right. Any other topics or show and tell? Oh, looks like you got a couple folks willing to help out with Helm charts there, Dan.
I've written a lot of Helm charts. I don't have the time to commit to writing one, but I'm happy to review a PR. I have reviewed lots of Helm chart PRs.
Cool.
Is there still like an official hub or not a hub?
I don't know. It's been a while since I've like looked at the hub stuff, but
typically no. Most projects just put it in their own Git repository. The official Helm Charts repository is deprecated, so kind of you either go to a community specific, or Bitnami has some good charts in general.
Imagine Sandbox might be a good starting point for us just to get going, right? In terms of a Helm chart, that's kind of where we have that central place. They'll get something more official or better in the future.
One other thing that I was wanting to mention was I was thinking about this the other day. The kexec and the reboot actions, or they're not really actions as such. At the moment, the reboot works because the Tink Docker container as part of Hook watches for an action that drops a reboot file, and then it will basically do the syscall for reboot. The kexec action is its own thing, which does kind of grub lookups to find initRDs and things like that. I'm probably going to investigate how we can do that better. I may need to move more logic into things like the Tink worker so that the reboot and the kexec actions kind of complete successfully, and then the Tink worker will take care of actually doing those actual syscalls and handing things over. So at the moment, the reboot was a random idea I had like a couple of months ago that kind of needs turning into something proper. And the kexec action, we need to kind of come up with a better way for it to report what it's actually doing. So I'll probably be moving that logic, I think, inside hook. And then we'll just have actions that trigger that behavior.
Right on. Cool. I had one DHCP relay. I brought this up, apologies, before the recording started, but since talking about Kubernetes and deploying Tinkerbell inside of there, right, one thing I found for DHCP for boots, in order to get traffic in, I've only been able to do that via a DHCP relay. I posted in the agenda, the weekly agenda, the little Go tool that I've been using. It does what it needs to do. I've been trying DNS mask and other ones, but if anybody knows of any other good DHCP relay tools, please please let me know.
Are we avoiding using host networking?
Was that
Are we avoiding using host networking?
in Kubernetes?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I didn't use it, but that's yeah, that's an interesting idea.
In a previous role, when I was deploying metal cubes bare metal operator, they would put DNS mask on host networking, and that's how we would handle that.
Oh, interesting.
But then maybe you might want to try K3S with the built-in load balancer, because that one, as far as I know, uses host network. Clipper is what it's called. So that might work then out of the box.
Oh, interesting. This is good info. So because I'm assuming Clipper with a K, just because most things are, yeah, okay. Cool, I'll have to play with those. Yeah, that would be nice not to have to run something externally, right? You can just, you know, however you kube your stuff, just do that and then run it. I'll have to try some of those. Thanks, everyone. All right, right on. Any other topics? Discussion, show and tell? Sweet. Oh, maybe one. Do we have any KubeCon, CNCFCon? Is there any official Tinkerbell plans that anybody knows of? Is there going to be a contingent there to do or talk about anything?
I think Jason submitted a talk.
Cool. Did it get do we know, did it get accepted, or is that hasn't happened yet where we know?
11th of July is the date that CFP responses will be given back.
Cool. Hopefully it got accepted.
Actually, there is another thing. The triage party. I don't know. I guess not everyone has been there, but I personally enjoyed the event a lot. And then I was thinking, because I couldn't find the link later on to the triage party setup that we have for Tinkerbell. So if there would be like an official link, something like triage Tinkerbell or whatever, that would be nice, because I'm like on my way to work in the bus, I could just triage some issues. That would be nice.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I set up the last one as just kind of a one-off standalone to see how it would go. And yeah, I thought it was awesome too. I had a great time, and we dropped our response average quite a bit. I think we're in the 20 days now, which is pretty awesome compared to we were in the 40 days before. But yeah, I can take that action item to get more in a more official
URL.
invite weekly, yeah,
No, it's the
URL.
URL. So Nicholas is asking, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Nicholas, you're saying like the URL, which is currently we're using the one that Marcus set up, which is on like some random port on a host that Marcus controls. It would be great
Yeah.
to have an official triageparty.tinkerbell.org
Yeah.
on 4443 with regular full blown SSL, all that stuff, so that
Yeah.
it's just there.
That would
and
be
Nicholas
great.
Can get that figured out. So yeah, we should figure out where we can run it and then how we can get that all wired up. And maybe even tweak the config. I think Thomas said that there's some tweaks we could do to the config. Marcus, is there a way to get the current config?
Yeah, I rolled it up as a gist somewhere. I'll share it again, but it's nothing. It's like a config map and a deployment. I don't recall if it. I think it might have something to do with my tokens, my GitHub tokens, to be able to see the repo. But yeah, I'm not sure if it actually uses that or needs that.
Well, we can get that all. I think that's a great. If as soon as someone says, "I'd like to triage tickets," the answer is, "We will make that happen for you."
The question is then, because triage party, as far as I know, like there's the limitation that I can't assign labels, but that's fine for now. Then I'll just ask for labels from the core maintainers, from you guys. Yeah, it's just a limitation that I came up with.
And that's solved. That's like solved with like more robots. And I don't know who I last had this I think it was Marky was having this conversation, or it was Thomas. Just interested in whether or not the community would go for it. I don't remember where this conversation happened. I hope it wasn't in a DM, because I hate being the person who's having all the good conversations in DMs. But we're already using robots for some of our, I think for merges. So introducing a robot to handle labels would be sensible. How do we tell the robot who is able to assign labels is maybe the next question.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, I don't know so much about Triage Party. I guess it doesn't make sense to build a completely new tool, but I was thinking if you could, instead of running Triage Party as a, let's say, as a server somewhere, you could just instead run it as a GitHub Actions job that aggregates the data and then pushes it to a GitHub Pages setup. That way, you would also basically do the same thing, because it's just aggregating data, and GitHub Actions doesn't cost anything. So, just a wild idea if somebody has too much spare time.
Being able to add labels and stuff and robots, to me, brings up a question that is still outstanding in my mind, is around projects roles. Like, do we, like, I would love for us to officially define things like maintainer or contributor, or whatever we decide on, right? But to have some clear understanding documented about what these are, I think would be extremely helpful for me personally. There's some other good examples, I think, already out there we can pull from other communities, but I think it just might need a proposal from someone here, and we kind of just get it out into one of our repos officially made, and then we will have to do things like permissions and whatnot, but I think it would be really helpful to have that, so that you actually know where to go, right? So Nicholas, you know people's spaces, and you know kind of who can do what, but that's kind of just learned knowledge, right? It would be nice someone coming brand new wouldn't have to figure that out as they went. They could just see, oh, okay, I can talk to this person and do that. So there is a Tink in the Tink repo. There is a conversation, a discussion that I started kind of around this idea of governance. I'll take an action to push that forward a little bit, maybe even get a proposal out for that. But if you're interested, please do comment on there.
I linked in the chat another set of charts, YAMLs. that I think this was the one that Jason had, the newer one that he had that he used for kind deployment. So
Oh,
that
sweet.
might be a better base for charts.
I added that to the doc as well.
Awesome, thanks.
For my understanding, what is roll bar for? Because I see like it's deprecated from what I could tell from the installation script, but
It's an error handling service. You can send errors to it. That's something Equinix Metal uses, and so it's kind of legacy stuff that needs to be removed from all of our code bases in Tinkerbell for sure.
so if there is a Helm chart, where would that live? Because I know that there's a lot of different repositories. Like all the different microservices live in different repositories. Yeah, it's just like monorepo is probably not something that you will go for in the near future or ever. But where would a Helm chart then live? In its own repository?
Sandbox is a decent place, as Jacob mentioned earlier. Like that's,
Yeah. Okay.
and then we could beef up. There's, because Sandbox already has Terraform, it has Vagrant. Adding Helm in there for now is not a terrible thing. And ideally we could then start if we can get it working really, really well. Like I think both the Vagrant and the Terraform stuff use Docker Compose. It might be interesting to settle on like, okay, and here's the officially supported minimal Kubernetes that we jam into the Terraform and into the Vagrant stuff, and then switch from Docker Compose to Helm. And being able to also use Helm in other production environments would be great. So that's probably where I would put it for now.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. All right, any other topics, discussions?
I guess we could briefly touch on, I'll add it to the notes as well. So and the question of metadata in terms of a thing I want to hack on a little further sometime soon is the ability to take the official canonical Ubuntu image and write it to a disk, and then because I'm here at Equinix Metal, and then actually have it get metadata correctly from Equinix metadata services, which are at least comparable to Hegel, if not actually Hegel yet, and have it actually correctly configure all the networking and other metadata based on that. I know there's an open thing in Cloud Init that Marcus has been pinging from time to time. I'm guessing, Marcus, you may not be currently working on it. I had some crazy ideas around possibly, so experiments I've done in the past were centered around using config drive, because as long as you can write out stuff to a partition with a config drive, it generally just works. I don't know if it's a good idea or not. I haven't done the experiments yet, but one option is to do some experiments around laying down a cloud image, and then before the system reboots, starting to lay down an extra partition for the cloud config data towards the end of the drive, and seeing if Ubuntu will still expand to the rest of the free space, but still having a partition for config drive metadata, and then not being dependent on network related services. And that would mean that anyone could write a config drive, sort of their own whatever metadata you have down to config drive, and then be able to do stuff. So if anyone has done other experiments or has any other thoughts on that, those are experiments I'm hoping to start working on soon.
There's, I think there's specially named disks that if those disks or partitions are identified, Cloud Init will opt to use them.
Yep.
Yeah, and
too.
Config too, and if it's, I've used VFAT and it's usually worked pretty well. It just means we need to translate from however metadata. Go ahead, sorry.
Again, bare metal operator follows this pattern with ironic, and so it's totally viable.
I
Is there,
think
so
in the
go ahead.
in the Tinkerbell world, I mean, this would be just another workflow, right? Like, is there any reason why somebody couldn't just anybody who's interested, create a workflow that creates a partition that acts in that way? Or do we not have the kind of intelligence to have multiple things creating disk partitions?
I mean, that somebody might be me. I might actually do that soon. So it's possible I will figure that out, especially if Andrew is saying that that is a thing that is done in other places. I've done it with partition tables that I control. I haven't done it with because I'm literally planning to use QEMU image to stream the QCOW onto a disk. I don't know exactly how Ubuntu will react with a tweaked partition table after the fact. That there's definitely experimentation to be done. Although, Andrew, I don't know if the stuff you're talking about, were they literally using QCOW files and then tweaking the partition tables, or was this like lay down a fresh partition table from the beginning?
I know that I provided Ubuntu QCOW files as input, and then the operator would just take care of it from there. But it was built using the OpenStack tooling. So,
okay. All right. I might ping you while I do my experiments to see if you have any insights.
Pinging Jason Tiberius might be a good thing too, because if I'm not mistaken, he might have done a bunch of this, or at least investigate a lot of it with his cluster API Tinkerbell stuff. So he might be a good resource too to ping.
Okay, thanks.
When you said having a workflow that does the config disk, were you meaning an action or an entire workflow?
An action.
Okay.
Yeah, the workflow would be like stream the QCOW file, and then tweak the partition table, and then drop the config drive and all that stuff. Yeah, and potentially splitting that into potentially even separate actions. Like I could imagine a generic mess around with partition tables action separate from a config drive action that the config drive action might want to use.
But I mean, if that is the case, then you could technically, I mean, yeah, we could just set up there should be a fairly simple action to just, what is it? Haggle to config drive.
Right. Yes.
Something like that.
Right.
This is giving me all kinds of thoughts on how Equinix Metal could take advantage of this, but yeah, those are other concerns. But I don't like when a system defines. I don't like when a cloud provider messes with your disk configuration. I don't like it when it like touches anything on the file system or creates magic partitions without your input. So being able to define this in actions that you control, I like that approach to it. And it would be cool to see how Equinix Metal could adopt that kind of flexibility to let the user define how and where they want that information provided.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, certainly my angle for this is Equinix Metal related. And my preference is to use network-based metadata discovery and have everything sort of just work fully with cloud in it. But I don't know if that's always an option. I don't think we currently provide good network configs in like the Haggle metadata. I don't know if we correctly translate that in a way that Cloud Init currently understands. And that's not my area of expertise, which is why I've been considering this config drive, because the advantage of the config drive is it is a separate partition that is not messing with the file system of the image provided. But yes, I can see the concern of like, okay, but you are doing something weird on the disk that maybe the user wasn't expecting.
So the advantage to using config drive or setting up a Tinkerbell action to convert a metadata service to config drive is a fairly old and stable API within Cloud Config. I know, for example, at least Fedora 31 or 32 actually shipped with a very old cloud config that didn't work for all, or sorry, Cloud Init package, which didn't work for more modern things. And so to actually take advantage of it, we ended up having to like FPM up our own new Cloud Init and host it in our own repository. So that's one of the advantages of the config drive, is it is a fairly ubiquitous interface to much older and more supported versions of Cloud Init. Whereas unless you're on like Ubuntu has the most up-to-date packages because it's canonical. And so it's just like, it's kind of a trade-off there between what your intended fleet management strategy would be, I think.
I don't know where to insert this in this conversation, but vendor data, that's all I wanted to say now. Vendor data is another piece of the whole user data puzzle. And that's where Equinix Metal should be providing some customizations that the user can do whatever they want in user data, and that user data can override what was defined as vendor data. So if we're making this config drive in Tinkerbell, those users doing that would also want to take advantage of vendor data. And I think, is that possible from the metadata perspective? I think so far we've only ever messed with user data in examples, but maybe we should be messing with vendor data in Tinkerbell examples, and then allowing actions to populate other user data or take advantage of user data. Each node has its own individual user data, but the devices share a common vendor data.
So that would be something that are you saying that'd be something that would be interesting to build in? By default, you get that just by running the Tinkerbell stack. If you provision a system, you get vendor data available to your machine, or is that not exactly what you're saying?
I think even the user data is it's only defined by the blob, by the JSON blob that you provide when you're creating the device, right? So if you want to provide vendor data, it's just another URL that you'd be, or it's just another JSON component that you're putting in there, but maybe Hegel has to support it. I think Hegel might need to have an awareness of how to map that metadata. So maybe this is something to bring up to Hegel.
Got it. Yep, that's fair.
Actually, I have another question. In PB&J, you basically removed the HTTP API and replaced it with gRPC. I'm not exactly an expert on gRPC, but is there going to be no HTTP API anymore, or how does it work?
Yeah, that's fair. So at the moment, the main API is gRPC. You can turn a flag on that will turn on the kind of previous HTTP endpoints. The idea was, though, to deprecate all of the HTTP stuff. There's a doc in there, let me drop in, that talks about using a client called Evans. It's just a gRPC client. You technically could use any gRPC client to connect, and that would allow you to run the different RPCs to do the different functionality.
So is that a translator from HTTP to gRPC, or am I misunderstanding that?
No, this is just a gRPC client that would just be able to, you could run and it could make those calls.
Okay. For PB&J, is that the only service that you want to deprecate HTTP for, or for all services you would like to deprecate HTTP? I mean, wait, does Tink server, does it have HTTP endpoints?
I think it has a couple legacy ones. It does, if I'm not mistaken, it does not cover the gamut of, you can't do the full breadth of things that you can with the gRPC stuff. So I don't think you can do all of the creates or destroys and whatnot. I think there's a few of them maybe that are just kind of in there, but if I'm not mistaken, yeah, they're not fully covered. And I think there might have even been an issue out there to remove some of them. But Hegel has both. It's got HTTP endpoints and it's got gRPC endpoints. Boots doesn't have any gRPC. It's got HTTP just for Pixie booting. What other services do we have out there? That's kind of it. So I think we've been half foot in the door, half foot out of the door of both gRPC and HTTP. There are interesting things if HTTP is helpful, right? For PB&J at least, right? I know gRPC, the Go gRPC frameworks, you can add like the HTTP gateway stuff that'll do automatic translations. Yeah, that might be something interesting we could add in, but it just in general, the PB&J kind of the legacy stack of HTTP, that's slated to be deprecated for a couple of reasons too. The underlying code is actually changing, so we're using this little library called BMC-lib, which will allow us to have a little bit more robust interactions with BMCs. The older stuff wasn't retrofitted to have any of that in there. So yeah.
It was just interesting for me because I'm working on another project where I'm basically integrating HTTP APIs, and if it's gRPC, then integrating Tinkerbell might be a bit tricky. But yeah, there's this gRPC HTTP thing, then that might help a lot.
Yeah, I'll dig up I think there might have been a ticket or two. I'll dig those up. I can post them in Slack or something later on if I find them. Cool. Anything else? Going once, going twice. All right, I thought this went well for an agendaless start to a meeting. We had a lot of things to talk about. So yeah, I appreciate everybody's input and time. I will stop the recording. We'll see y'all online, and next Tuesday, triage party, same time as this. And yeah, have a great day, everyone.